seen this one, but German Film Festival is on. Is it to the 19th? I think, isn't it?
Yes.
In six Palace Cinemas in Melbourne, and if you travel interstate, it's in every state to the best of, or most states. I'm not sure about Tasmania. Is it in Tassie? Do you know, Pete?
Not that I'm aware of, but all the mainland states.
Mainland states, yeah. Look, it's called A Stasi Comedy, and this was the one that was the opening night film, but there's still opportunity, obviously, to see it. And, I mean, look, there have been movies about the East German Stasi, which stands for the Ministry for State Security, before. It's amazing when I was looking at doing a bit of work on this, how long it operated for. I mean, do you know off the top? I mean, I do now, having researched it. But, Peter, do you know how many years it operated for, the Stasi?
Well, not exactly, but I did visit the Stasi Museum in Berlin.
Ah.
That's an incredible, shows an incredible array of objects, devices, and impacts that the Stasi had. I think it operated for at least 10 to 15 years, I'm sure.
40 years, Peter.
40?
From 1950, and this is what amazes me, till 1990. I mean, that blew me away.
Although I think originally it wasn't referred to as the Stasi. I think it actually became that very specific enclave later on.
Well, it's a secretive police agency with a notorious reputation for spying on the country's populace. And this comedy, a Stasi comedy, as it's aptly named, sends it up and does so with some panache. We start in the present day when Ludger Fuchs, played by Jörg Schuttauf, he's a former dissident and quite a celebrated author, finally gets the opportunity to view his personal file, because what happens is that these things are locked away, right? I mean, even if the ministry no longer exists, in terms of even sharing with the people that they spied on their own files, well, that was a no-no. And this was a guy who worked within the Stasi, and yet he couldn't view his personal file until now. And that file consists of documents and photos collected on him by the intelligence body, notwithstanding the fact that he was part of it. And to mark the occasion, Fuchs' wife, Karina, played by Margarita Broich, organises a surprise family party. Shall we say, Peter, not all goes according to plan. Fuchs reflects on exactly what went down in the early 1980s, because that was when he was operational, and it is colourful, to say the least. And that was when a significantly younger Fuchs, played by David Cross, was engaged by the Stasi. And he was introduced to the fold by his commanding officer, played by Henry Hubchen. Fuchs's job, and that of his three inept layabout colleagues, was to infiltrate the counterculture scene of a particular district in Germany, which is called the Prenzlauer Berg district. And it was a breeding ground for artists and bohemians. Well, free-thinking radicals is probably a decent way of putting it. Almost exposed on his first assignment, Fuchs finds a very pleasurable way to maintain his cover, Peter. And before long, he's fallen for a couple of women. One is Karina, played by Antonia Bill, a member of the subversive peace movement, and the other one is Natalie, Delilah Piasco, beautiful, bold, brazen neighbour. So it's quite a clever film, A Stasi Comedy. Paints the former repressive organisation as officious and bungling with arrogant leadership, does it not?
It does. Now, we should talk about this because Leander Hausmann, who directed the film, this is the third part of a trilogy that he has made about East Germany from a more benign perspective. He was born and grew up in East Germany, and he actually had pretty good experiences. And so Sun Alle and NVA were his previous films, which painted a rosier picture of what life was like in East Germany. Now, this new one is quite a clever script because there are so many references to East German behaviour in the early 1980s, when it eventually we flash back to that period of time. And what he's done is he's provided an antidote to films like The Lives of Others and Balloon and a number of other films that have shown the Stasi to be a particularly nasty and vicious sort of group that would arrest and possibly torture anyone who was looking towards the West in a positive sort of way. I mean, the film The Last Execution, which is also in the German Film Festival, portrays that, because there are a number of people who were executed by the Stasi in secret, who were looking very positively towards the West. So in this film, A Stasi Comedy, Leander has tried very hard to put a more positive, benign sort of face to that period. And I think he's done a reasonably good job, although I think he overdoes it. He over-eggs the whole film.
I mean, slapstick is a really big part of the offering, and that'll rub some people up the wrong way, I reckon. I mean, slapstick is an acquired taste, is it not?
Well, I subtitled the film Carry On Stasi.
I agree.
And I thought, yes, I think it's nice to make fun of it and have a more positive, benign view of it all, but I think he does overdo it.
But I mean, you say positive. I don't think it's really positive. I think it makes a mockery of it, and I mean, there's a bit more spice there because there's the love triangle. I mean, there's a lot going on. So I reckon unless you concentrate, you risk losing threads of the unfolding story. That's my opinion. Did you not think that?
Look, to some extent, I think you're right, and you also have to have a sensibility about what Germany was like during that period, and he does satirise it considerably, because a lot of what is depicted, especially those Stasi agents that were so bumbling and so Inspector Clouseau-like in their in their behaviour, really was not the case in terms of what was going on at the time. So he has tried to overlay a strong sense of comedy to portray it as a ridiculous sort of era, but really it was quite a nasty sort of era.
It's very difficult because, for example, Mel Brooks with what he did with Hitler and stuff like that as
the
well.
The producers, yes.
Yeah, it's that I've got to say that it sits uncomfortably with me because here was arguably the biggest tyrant in the history of mankind, and anybody trying to make light of something like that. I understand that there'd be some people who would find this hard in that regard, but I thought the leads did a good job. I thought David Cross captured the incredulity required to inhabit the role of the young Fuchs, whose Stasi career could well have been over before it began, and I also liked the portrayal of the passionate, free-spirited young women who became part of his life, and also the quandary of Fuchs's friend from bygone days who sort of watches while he muscles in on a lady that he likes. I thought they were good, and I thought Henry Hubchen acted up as Ludger's boss and minder. I got the impression he enjoyed the exaggeration that he brought to the persona. So, I mean, they did what they were asked to do, did they not?
Absolutely. Henry Hubchen is an actor who's been around in films for many, many years, and he's always a very reliable actor. And I should also mention Detlef Buck, who plays a key small role in the film. And there are some references by Leander Hausmann to his previous appearances in his two other films. I mean, there's a lot of in-joking going on there for people who are familiar with East German politics, behaviour and attitudes at the time. And Leander, who I met a number of years ago when he was in Australia for his film Hotel Lux, he talked about his positive friendly experiences and was decrying how the West treated the East in such a disdainful and rotten sort of way. So he wanted to address that in his films. But yes, the acting was good. It's nice to see Tom Schilling in a small role in the film, although it's a very self-effacing sort of role, not an important one, even though he's a major actor in German cinema. Yes, overall the acting is fine. The look of the film, beautifully shot in widescreen, using the two time periods very, very cleverly. There's a lot to like and admire in the film. I just felt he overdid the comedy a little bit too much.
But you also do not need to have seen the other two, which I haven't, right?
No.
So to appreciate, and I think that's really an important point. So you go along and see, don't feel like you've missed out because this is obviously a distinctive style that is brought to this particular film. And suffice to say, the effectiveness of the parody of the furtive entity wasn't lost on me. So, I mean, I think it depends on your whether you see this as being really doing something that's a bridge too far, or whether you embrace it. And it looks, as I said at the outset, slapstick to me is some people just can't stand it because it's so silly, and other people embrace it for what it is. So let's get a score out of 10 from you for A Stasi Comedy.
Oh, look, there's a lot to admire in the film. I really enjoyed it for the most part, so I gave it 7 out of 10.
And I gave it 7 to 7.5. So, we're in similar territory. So good stuff. Now, look.